This is Professor Dr. Howard Nicholas.
We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything.
We intend to process more and more of our cocoa in our country with the aim of producing more chocolate ourselves.
Africa, all we hear in the news about this beautiful continent with a lot of resources is how poor Africans are. The continent is home to 1/3 of the world's poorest, but Africa has a combined GDP of $3 trillion, and African countries have the potential to be financially independent. So what's stopping them? The continent has 40% of the world's gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. The largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds and uranium are in Africa. It holds 65% of the world's arable land, basically land you can farm on, 65%, and 10% of the planet's internal renewable freshwater source. This is Nigeria. Nigeria is the 14th largest oil producer in the world.
Pay attention to this graph. Here you can see the enormous potential of this country. It is the 9th country in the world in terms of income from crude oil exports. And in the ranking of countries with the most reserves, it ranks 11th, just behind the United States.
But 63% of people living within Nigeria are living below the poverty line. Some even say Nigeria is...
As of today, the Nigerian government cannot control all of its territory. So it's a failed state. However, things can change.
These guys are climbing into these holes, straddling railroad ties and hauling up tons of cobalt with...
About 70% of the world's mined cobalt, an essential metal for batteries used in electric vehicles and consumer electronics, is produced in the Congo. The cobalt industry is valued at $8.7 billion this year and projected to hit $19 billion by 2030.
I mean, I'm going back centuries. Never in human history has there been more suffering that generated more profit and was linked to the lives of more people around the world, ever in history, than what's happening in the Congo right now. And the reason I say that is this. The cobalt that's being mined in the Congo is in every single lithium crisis. Without cobalt, and 3/4 of the supply is coming out of the Congo. And it's being mined in appalling, heart-wrenching, dangerous conditions. And so that's why people need to know, because by and large, the world doesn't know what's happening in the Congo.
It's something that people sort of know peripherally, that, you know, that they call them conflict minerals, and, you know, they know that they're coming from an area of the world that's very poor, but I don't think people are aware of how horrible it is. There have been some documentaries that have been done on it, and they're all terrifying.
You see a trend already. Countries with everything to become economically independent, doing the complete opposite. Ghana and Ivory Coast, corruption, poverty, always in debt. But these two countries produce 75% of the world's cocoa, the main ingredient in chocolate. Chocolate is a $100 billion industry, but they make just 2% of that in the long run. If you produce 75% of anything, you should at least make more than 2% of the profits, right? Meanwhile, in Switzerland, there's a whole culture built around cocoa. They even have chocolate festivals. The Swiss made $1 billion in 2021 from chocolate alone. What did the Swiss do right? To make 10 times the profit the largest producers of cocoa beans made. So what's the problem? Don't Ghana and Ivory Coast like money? Or it's by design?
We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished.
This is Professor Dr. Howard Nicholas.
Africa, historically, sub-Saharan Africa has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. They force all the producers to produce the same uniform banana. You know, the crap you buy in the West and has no taste at all. You go to any developing country, you know how a banana tastes, don't you? There's so many of them, lots of varieties, but we only market 1 or 2 types, so we have control, you see. If you don't produce at the price I want you to produce, I go to the next country. You see, we get control. So these buyers, they impose that control, and they keep pushing the prices down and down and down. This is the game.
See the price of cocoa beans on the global market. Cocoa prices have been fairly stable, even though demand is still high and production has gone down due to bad weather and illegal miners. It's almost like when it comes to cocoa, the prices have been set. Supply or demand doesn't affect the prices much, which is highly unusual. These two countries have been fighting the prices of cocoa for years now, but no real change has been seen in their revenues. And this, ladies and gentlemen, the same problem other developing countries face when it comes to their resources. Why can't developing countries make money from an industry they should frankly have control over? It should be easy. You have the raw materials, right? In the case of Ghana and Ivory Coast, it all comes down to who makes the finished product, like Nutella and the chocolate fountain, whoever makes that. Then they should start making the product in their country. What's stopping them? These countries want to make more money from their hard work. Obviously.
We intend to process more and more of our cocoa in our country with the aim of producing more chocolate ourselves.
But they also need the dollars they make from exporting cocoa beans to pay for medical supplies, food, and fuel to run their economies. They even need dollars to buy chocolates. If they should stop exporting cocoa beans, they would have no foreign exchange to pay for essential goods. But what about getting these chocolate producers to process more of the cocoa beans in these countries? There's cheap labor, and you don't have to send the cocoa beans all the way to factories in Europe. But they refuse with excuses like, and you won't believe this, Ghana is too hot, and if they produce chocolate here, it will melt. So Ghana, still determined to get some of the cocoa dollar, has started to process some of the cocoa beans to chocolate with delicious brands like King's Bite, Omama Royal, and 57 Chocolates, which is run by 2 sisters, who said, and I quote, "If Switzerland could make great chocolate using Ghana's resources, why couldn't they do the same in their country?" So they did. With all these efforts, only about 20% of Ghana's cocoa is processed in the country, but there's a long way to go. Maybe one day they'll pull it off, but for now, the West will keep using the design of the global market to get cheap resources to make life better there. Yes, in the country. I forget it. Melt.